Hello and welcome to the Wellness Esquire podcast. I am your host, Ariella. I love this conversation with Damon Hudson, who runs his own personal injury law firm in Albuquerque, and he does it in such a way that allows his clients to feel truly understood and supported. We talked about the serious back injury and surgery he had during law school, his path from work that didn't feel good for him and that frankly he wasn't very good at, to doing the impactful and meaningful work that he does now. We also talked about his well-being journey, the steps he takes to care for himself and why, and how he treats himself and moves forward when he doesn't quite reach his target. I love having these authentic conversations with our community, and I know you're going to enjoy this one. Excellent.
Hi.
Hello. It's so nice to meet you. How are you today?
You too? Doing great yourself?
I am fantastic. I am I would think of this as a square or rectangular yurt.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah. I know you had posted recently about one of the joys of working for yourself is you can play hooky and go do whatever you want and hang with your family. And
Yeah.
about 6 months ago, my husband and I decided to become digital nomads. So we don't
Wow.
live anywhere
Okay.
anymore. We just basically beach hop around the world and work from wherever we are. So
Fantastic.
yeah. I am so thrilled to talk to you. I want to make sure that you saw my email where I'm already noted that I just hit record before we start.
Okay.
You are part of my guinea pig round of using a new automated message that I think didn't go out to you, where I just say, like, we start from scratch, I start recording from the beginning. And then, of course, I have the power of the editing button. So if you end up saying something where you're like, ooh, wish I hadn't, you just tell me,
Sure.
and no one ever hears it.
I'm not too worried about that.
Me neither. I just want to make sure that people know. So I was having so much fun going through your LinkedIn posts
Okay.
because you're really just saying everything in the way that I'm looking for people to do
Okay.
on the podcast. And it's amazing. And I'm delighted about it because I decided to initially create the Wellness Esquire and then to do the podcast because we are humans.
Yeah.
And we don't often show up in the industry in that way. And when I started to show up as myself and I started to very slowly find other lawyers who were doing that, and it was sort of one person at a time, and I started to realize, oh, it's not just me dealing with XYZ. And I ended up feeling like every time I connected with a person who was sort of new to being a non-robot, they were like, oh, there's someone out there, there's one person. And then I'd say, well, actually, there's so many of us, we just don't know each other.
Yeah.
And so with the podcast, I was like, well, I have these conversations all the time. What if I just sort of put a microphone in front of us and hit record and showed the industry we're everywhere.
Yeah.
We're making mistakes. We're learning from everything. We've got our just the human stuff, and this is how we are showing up authentically and vulnerably, and figuring out how to design careers that actually work for who we are, and sharing that with each other. So
Yeah.
so
It's kind
you're
of like in the context, like you're not designing your life to work with your business or vice versa, right? What's the point of being on your own? Like if you have the authority to do that, and if you're not using it, you're probably using it poorly then, right? And I tell myself that.
You do. So is that part of your like a daily or routine kind of conversation that you have with yourself?
I mean, I'll focus on the wellness side, and I'll be happy to admit the things I don't do well, and like I'm trying to be better about it. And I'll also say that I feel like my wellness in the last, like, the efforts towards it have improved because my kid is sleeping through the night. So I don't know, like sleep is like the number one thing that I
Yeah.
feel like I'm a better able to think of new ideas and better able to control my emotions when I deal with a frustrating adjuster. All of those things are like sleep is where, and so I'm trying to be better about it. I can, like, especially in private practice, like, of course, like, right, I don't know, it's not called like screen cheating or like that thing where you like stay up late and watch a lot of stuff because you just haven't felt like the time to do that during the day. And I super guilty of like, oh, let me watch this YouTube video on old soccer or football games or something like that.
Sure. Well, it's really easy to know the things that you want to be doing and to know what allows you to show up as your best self. Making it actually happen on a regular basis, especially when you're feeling stressed, is an entirely different
Sure.
thing. Yeah. So I want to start at the at a version of the
Sure.
beginning, which is, I think, in your childhood.
Okay.
With the ultimate question being what led you to law school, and it seems to me that part of that at least started, whether you really understood it or not, as a kid when you had your first experience being in court. And I loved the story that you shared. So can you talk about your experience of, the one that I know
Sure.
about is your parents were going through a divorce, and I'll let you take it from there.
Sure, and I'll say it's a lot easier to type that out than it is to talk about it. But so it actually is like the second
Yeah.
divorce that it was like my mom had remarried, and this is another divorce, and it had become really contentious and it had become really awful in a lot of ways. And like looking back on it, it's like I don't remember, but like I remember this moment where I was in court and I had been there were issues of like physical violence towards me and how I had responded to them. And so the moment like I just was like had my hand, I was raising my hand because I wanted the judge to acknowledge me because I wanted to say something. And I held it up for a long time, like an embarrassing, like again, even sharing that story, like it's not one that like feels like I felt like to some degree though that makes me recognize and it makes me think of how clients can feel or how the legal system can feel. Sure, now, and I don't even know if that led. I think it just relates. But I remember just holding my hand up, and then finally the judge was like, "I'm not going to acknowledge you." Pretty much, like very openly, he was like, "Pretty much, put your hand down." And so I think it can now, as a lawyer representing someone, I can totally see where it would be like what like I have people talking on my behalf, right? You have sure I'm an advocate, but a lot of times you probably feel like you can tell your story better, and so that's really hard. But I think you say that that led me towards law. I don't know. I would say it definitely led me far away from family law. Like I never have explored it,
Mhm.
never been interested. I just think it seems too contentious for as contentious as my job is. I think I could ratchet it up to another level. But like looking at it as a context of like who I am and where I was, I was speaking to a classroom this week, and it's like, well, I think I don't mind confrontation because my parents got divorced as a kid, right? It was like it became a comfort in good or bad, whether that's the case. And so I definitely I don't mind it now because I get my confrontation out during the day, and then I can go play with my kids, and spend time with my wife.
So what that was maybe not what led you to law school, but definitely part of how you operate now.
Yeah.
What were the pieces that led you on your journey to law school in the first place? And then we'll get into what led you to the kind
Sure.
of work you do now, because it's shifted.
Well, a lot of I think it's a lot of stumbling into things. Like I like the look. Recently, I was looking back on like, oh, if I had made this decision, would I even be a lawyer now? And like, a lot of things worked out the way to get where I was. I got a bachelor's degree, went and goofed around for a few years, got a master's degree, and then partway through realized I don't want to do that master's program. I didn't want to do the work, and so I went to law school. But the only reason I thought about going to law school is I remember as a kid thinking of the two things I wanted to be was an NFL player and a lawyer. And I never, like at 8 years old, maybe it was possible. It felt possible. By the time I was finishing high school, it was my abilities and my size. The main two things you need were lacking to be an NFL player. And so I didn't take that path. But again, I didn't think about law school. I didn't have lawyers in the family. It wasn't anything I was encouraged towards. But I remember, so when I thought of the idea again, I was like, well, what had I thought about? And so I spent time talking to people who were lawyers, and I also got I don't know if about you, it's like a lot of people were like, don't do it. Like most of the advice I got was don't do it, which looking back to who I am is like maybe that's the best motivation for me sometimes is like as a kid and as a parent now, it's like, oh, telling someone don't do it sometimes is but so I went and I thought I was going to be a tax lawyer. I worked at defense firms. Everything I thought that was going to chase prestige or feel good for my ego. I went that direction, and I only had to like what's it? Insanity is the definition of doing the same thing over and over again. So I 3 times tried to work at a defense firm until after a year after the into the first one, I didn't like it, and they were like, "I don't think you like it, and we're not loving what you're doing." And so that's when I was encouraged to. They're like, "You have a month to see if you want to reaffirm here or and make some changes or go on your own." And so I went and looked for jobs that night, and within a month had a new job and doing plaintiff's work. And within two months of that, I like it clicked. I was like, oh, now I get what I was going for. Now I actually get to help people, which was kind of like right I don't know, the hubris of youth of going to law school. Like you want to help people, and sure, plenty of people. So I found a path that would kind of lead to that.
When you were working on the defense side, did you have a sense at that time of what you thought success was supposed to look like?
Well, no, money, right? Like, I mean, like, I hate to say it, like, you're going to an expensive school, you see all these people sponsoring classrooms, you see these giant law firms. And so what's sold as success is somebody working 60 to 70 hours a week, somebody who is billing like crazy, somebody who um, doesn't have time with their kid, right? And so that was like maybe the version of success, and it's the prestige, right? Like this law firm is the oldest law firm in X state. And like, I remember working in a law firm like that, and like looking back, it's like that that prestige is what's sold, right? These are the, and I went to a school that had a lot of feeders into defense firms, but it also for me was not like I didn't, looking back, and it's like I didn't need that prestige. I was happy to be subversive and not necessarily do what everyone else agreed with. Like, and so yeah, I kind of I thought that was what success would look like, and now looking at it, it's like, oh, having satisfaction and like looking forward to working and getting to say, hey, like I never imagined I was going to start my own law firm, and like it kind of fits in this niche of allowing me to do what I want to do and make some mistakes, but also like I have to hold myself accountable, which I think I'm pretty capable of doing. So it's been it more from like, oh wait, having control and direction and like authority, and then also getting to make some large decisions. Like that really became a benefit I never would have expected, and kind of. I don't know if I'm successful, but I think there will be. I'm fairly certain there will be a year or two of business. I'm 8 months in, so maybe just keeping my business open is success now, and feeding my family.
Amazing. What led you to decide now's the time I'm going to go out on my own and I can do this?
Um, I had maybe briefly thought of it 4 or 5 years ago, like 2 years into practice, and I didn't. I read a book kind of leisurely, and I was like, okay, maybe. And then I got an offer to go to a bigger firm, and I kind of helped start a personal injury department, and so it was me and a paralegal, so I kind of got running my own shop with training wheels. And then I was also generating cases. I joined a business group. I was bringing in cases. I had people who were calling me to go with my law firm. Like, yeah, sure, they was a big law firm, but they called because they wanted Damon. And so, and I brought in a big case that settled for a good amount of money that I got some of, that kind of made me go, well, I think like that was the final nail that I'm like, I got to do this. But like a month before I was leaving, I brought in like 4 cases in a month, and I brought in a number of them. And I'm like, okay, well, that's the main thing you need to run your own firm. And so it was seeing, like, I look at it as like, now it makes sense, but there was a moment where I thought, well, why isn't everyone doing this? And I guess I was asking myself that, and that's confidence. Like I still had a little bit of like self doubt, but that's like, okay, I if I felt that way, it was time to do it.
Did you have any part of your mindset that you felt like you had to fight, and like, or any self-limiting beliefs where kind of that you had to go, no, no, I can do this? Or what was your view on, well, you know, is there a certain number of years where you're supposed to practice before you're sort of
Hmm.
allowed to go out on your own? Or am I supposed to some of the things that I had thought about before
Sure.
I went on my own was, am I supposed to know everything before I'm allowed to go out and launch?
Sure.
How much am I, how does perfectionism play in? How do mistakes play in? How does all of those kinds of again, kind of self-limiting beliefs play into just being like, yeah, actually, I got this, and by the way, you're never going to know everything.
I think my wife once asked me, like, when I was getting pretty close to finalizing the decision, or when we were on that path, and she said, well, isn't it kind of cocky to do this? And I was like, well, I think I have to be. And so like the self, but at the same point, by no means am I sitting here going like, last year, this time, like this time last year, I wasn't sure I was going to do this. And so it was not like, it was like, well, first off, can I get cases? And as the year went on, I was like, well, I'll keep bringing in cases, keep bringing in cases. And so it's like, I had to, I had set benchmarks, but I had to continuously show myself, right? I'm going to generate cases. People will trust me. I think that the thing that helped me overcome that is like over the last year, it had become a thing of, you can't run a business if people can't trust you to be their attorney. And so like again, it's these people like saying kind things, or just appreciate my representation. But sure, like I think the money question is a huge one of like, am I going to afford to do this? Am I going to be able to? Will there be a month like? can I do for 3 months? Can I do for 4 months? And so having that baseline, and then am I going to be able to juggle all the other pieces? Because I remember for the last 3 months I was at that job, I was like exploring the options. I was like, do I have a logo? Do I have what kind of service am I going to use? And so like creating all those things, and I wouldn't say I had a plan, and I wouldn't like a clear plan. I wouldn't say I built the boat as it was moving along, but somewhere in the middle of those two things, like I definitely. And so the self-limiting beliefs, like I think every morning I have a reminder on my phone that's like to do a self-affirmation, and it's like was it, I always remember it in the morning, but it's like I support me, or just like right, and just something to reaffirm that I got to be on my own team. And I think of like, and like to get in the wellness aspect of this, I think that that definitely comes from like therapy I got in the first 2 years of like I got a from being a lawyer, you got some free therapy. And I remember talking, and this woman was like, you should do a daily affirmation. And so like it starts for me being raised as a kid of divorce. I think it's easy in a context like that to have negative, like I'm an idiot, or say like negative self-talk. And I feel since I've become a lawyer because of therapy, I've been a lot better about that. And breathing, I'm not perfect by any means, and it definitely happens. But I look back at myself of like pre-lawyer and post-lawyer as like that being something that just allowed me to better believe in myself. And so again, like maybe hubris, but I think there's a line between hubris and self-belief that like is hard to know. And maybe I cross it over, but I sure shit wouldn't have done it if I didn't have either of them. So
So you talk a lot of your posts on LinkedIn, reflect your values and the way that you feel so strongly about how you build your practice and how you show up for clients. And a lot of that seems certainly to come from you, but also to sort of in contradiction to the way you were often trained or the examples that you saw, where, I remember one of your posts was talking about someone, one of your colleagues or bosses advised you, you've got to be aggressive because you can be. And
yeah.
so, how do you think about really the way that you show up in these circumstances and with your clients, where you are creating an environment where they feel comfortable just letting go and letting you guide them along, and you doing it in a way that you feel not only good and competent and qualified as their attorney, but also you can sleep at night and feel like you're showing up as a good human being as well?
Yes, and so I think, I mean, right, you gotta sometimes your best lessons are the worst lessons. Like, and some of that goes from the defense side of like seeing like it didn't have that personal relationship, which it was really hard. I was not a good defense attorney. I will fully admit that. But I think part of it is I didn't care, and so I couldn't put my heart behind it. I couldn't put my effort behind it. Like, when it became like, and I know it probably sounds tacky or cliche, but like I definitely like the personal side of personal injury, and that is like I have to, and it doesn't, right. I don't need to know everything about you. I will learn a lot about you as your personal injury attorney. Like I've learned a lot about people by their medical records, right? You just learn a lot about them. But it's like for me, the one of the cooler things is I've represented a number of friends' parents. So I've known these people for years, but then I represent their parents, and this is like a number of people that I'm like, oh, how like, and so like I have to when I go to lawyer mode, I'm like, okay, how do I sometimes make sure not to ask if I'm around other people about their parents. Like, well, I don't want them to know that I know. I mean, that I try and preserve that confidentiality. Uh, and so the thing for me is like finding that, and it's nice to hear you think my values are clear, because sometimes I feel like maybe they're not clear enough, and maybe I'm just saying something pithy on LinkedIn, but it definitely feels like the having the relationship is what makes it worthwhile. And like the like the reviews are good for like ego, but again, like seeing them to know how you made someone feel. And there's sometimes clients shock me where I feel like I did a good job, and they say the way they express it is like I would have never thought of it that way, but they feel supported, right? Like me trying to reach out to somebody once a month, sometimes a little like sometimes that may not happen perfectly, but if I'll text you or let you know what's going on, at least in the state I live in, New Mexico is very land manana. So me staying on the ball is helpful to people. And so just like some little stuff, and I think maybe some of that relates to being like a worry ward or having anxiety, that I try and channel that into like being a little bit more frequent with communication. And sure, there are ways I can better automate some of those things, but also at the same point, I had a client once, they picked me in a big firm, and they picked me, and I said, why? And they're like, we got so many automated texts that I didn't know who I was going to be dealing with. And for me, it was like, well, I would have liked to have some of those, but I'm also like, well, maybe some people prefer, again, that personal relationship. You get referrals from people because they know you. And that's been most of what my practice has been built on, since went out on my own, from people who are like, well, I like Damon. So I think that trying to keep it as personal as possible is definitely going to be hard as I go longer term, but that's the thing I'd really like to keep to, because that's the like part I enjoy about most of what I get to do. I get to work with people, I get to help people, and I get to kind of stand up for them.
It's interesting. You said that you weren't really sure when I mentioned the values. Was your question around whether you feel like you're navigating your practice really solid in your values, or you were sort of surprised to hear that that's easily reflected in what you share?
I mean, I guess like right, like I mean, I have some espoused values, and like I have like on my website, and I like, but I guess the sometimes it feels like a jumble in my head, and so it's nice to hear that it feels clear to others, right? I mean, right, the out some you don't always. I think another thing is you get older and you realize you're an adult, is to some degree it's like, well, every adult doesn't believe like nobody has it figured out. But the thing about nobody having it figured out is like a little stuff of like when people compliment you, don't correct them. You don't need you don't need to say that's not true, because if they like that's the same belief, and so like I don't mean to do that in the context of the podcast here. I think it's necessary, but you have that you it doesn't feel like that, and so but clearly like the outward representation, right? Again, you see things that people say about you, and you're like, well, that's flattering. I need to probably believe that a little bit more then.
Well, we go around the world as ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's hard to sometimes be able to take a step back and recognize really how people are perceiving us. And, sometimes I think that's because you just become so accustomed to who you are and how you show up. And you're like, well, what, there's another way to be. What do you mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's also, when you I think so much about
Yeah.
perfectionism. And so I think it's also easy to feel like, well, but I could do so much better. And I could be clearer around, for example, my values and be more intentional. So does that mean that I don't have them? No,
Yeah.
it just means that like, oh, they're coming out naturally, fantastic. And maybe I think about them more, but that doesn't mean they're not there. And I can tell you for sure when I look at everything that you're writing about and the way that you are so transparent around just everything around the whole kind of trajectory of your career, the way you engage with clients, the way you perceive, at least in hindsight, how what felt like failure or rejection at the time has then led to where you are, and where you are seems to feel really good. These are the kinds of stories that I think we all really benefit from hearing. And so to me, that is a demonstration of your values, because you're saying, hey, this is the way I'm a human being, these are the ways I've struggled, and this is also the way I show up for my clients and make this career work
Hmm.
for me. And I'm going to share this with all of you because it might be helpful.
Yeah, and we kind of all run around telling ourselves a story, right? That I am good at this, I'm not good at that, and like, and as much as you tell yourself you'll believe it, and sometimes you'll miss like opportunities. My wife told me that she's like, I'm not a good skier. I ski, I fall a lot. And she's like, I wouldn't fall that many times. And I was like, I never thought of it that I fall a lot and I keep going and I enjoy it. But to some degree, I would have never thought had someone else not had that outside perception of like a lot of people would stop at this point. And not that I'm like pugnacious or in or the best at it, but it's like I don't know. It just felt like you hear that story, and I would have never told myself. And then sometimes I'm like, well, if that's something I can do skiing, why can't I do it here when I've fallen down, when I've made a mistake for a client, which happens, or in front of a judge, which happens. And so sometimes it's like, well, if I can overcome like those little things, that can easily build to the bigger things. But that's just a story that I've been that's all based on, right? The story that's in my head about, well, I don't think my values are that clear, or is my outward representation, or is my SEO demonstrating who, like any of those things that that matter in like helping and growing and building a practice.
So the post that connected us
Hmm.
initially was you had shared about a really serious back injury that you had during law school.
Yeah.
And I'm always drawn to people on, frankly, the rare occasion when I come across those stories, because I was really sick in law school.
Oh,
And I mean, I was born with some genetic stuff, and then my law school years were some of my particularly sick years.
and you were more stressed
Um,
than you had ever been before.
I was more stressed. I had gotten my fifth concussion right before law school started. Didn't understand for a long time after that the
Hmm.
connection, and everything I'd had was just building, and then got to this point with added stress and new injury and all of these things. And so and I so that the health journey has been a big part of my personal
Hmm.
journey and also professional journey. And that's actually what led me, in a way, to start the Wellness Esquire, because I felt like no one talks about health. And
Hmm.
I would, when I was in law school, I was very open personally, and everybody knew that I was going through something.
Hmm.
It was kind of hard to miss. But once I got out of law school, I was, and actually before, I had either I had both been explicitly told, don't ever tell anyone about your health.
Hmm.
And then the messaging I got from the industry was, don't tell anybody about your health. That's a demonstration of weakness. And then I got to a point of like, but it's part of who I am. I have to be open about this. And so I've become really passionate, frankly, about just highlighting these kinds of stories, whether it's physical health or emotional health or trauma or you name it,
Yeah.
because we often just feel like, no, I'm supposed to be a lawyer and I'm supposed to have it all figured out and I'm supposed to be strong 24/7 and I can show no weakness. And there's so much fear around that. So I, never want to hear that someone's gone through something challenging, but we do.
Yeah.
And I was so blown away when I first shared, and was just, the response was so many stories from lawyers saying, oh, me too. And I thought, oh, not just me? Huh. So, can you talk through your story? What happened in law school and your experience with that?
I used to be a runner, and it is unfortunately does feel like used to be. I'm not necessarily down to risk it now, but for the first year I got a lot more into running. I had done a little bit of it, but I got a lot more into it. We had run a half. I'd run my first half marathon, and then I think I was just casually continuing to run. I also would bike to school. I was just wanted to do something to be outdoors. I was in Nebraska, so it was like it was a short bike ride, but like especially in law school, I wanted to guarantee some kind of physical movement. I wasn't great about it all the time, but like a bike ride to do that. And then one day I got off the bike, my back wasn't feeling all right, and I had had back issues before. And then honestly, from that point on, for a number of months, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. Like I remember on my honeymoon jumping off. We were in Greece, and I jumped off a cliff, and it felt worse. And then I remember like I went to a Cairo for a while, and it got worse. Like little things that just kept like it kept not being. And that was like the what was it? Almost 6, 7, 8 months that it just kept getting worse and worse to the point where in my start of my second year, I could not sit for very long. I would just have like pain running down my leg. I'd be taking like the maximum amount of ibuprofen every day, and like that would help a little bit. I'd be doing some, I did some PT, I did a TENS unit. I'd be sitting there doing whatever I could to like survive a day. And then I'd go home and I would lay down and study that way. And so finally I went to PT, it didn't get any direction. And I got suggested to have a micro discectomy, which I don't know if I know what I know now I would do, like based on what the work I do. Like whenever clients are thinking about a surgery, I'm like, be very cautious. Like, and I had a good outcome, but I still, what was it? At a certain point, I had a technical disability. Like I could not sit in class anymore and had to study from home. So like, this is right before COVID. So I was like pre studying from home. I was taking classes online. And like you say, like it's abundantly clear to everyone that like they're talking about, oh, we have to record these classes now, which is not always done. And it becomes abundantly clear to everyone that I'm not there. And like I have friends text me and I'm not hiding it, but it's still like law school is like high school when you're older because everyone's competing. And so it feels shameful, right? The title of disability felt shameful, and which is not how it should. And so I was at home I finished out a semester that way. I had my back wasn't great for a while. I had to do a lot. It still hurt for 3 or 4 years, not to the same extent, but it definitely changed my perspective on how an injury can impact you. Like, as much as the pain was awful, like the mental exercise of like Googling your illness to find out, oh, everyone. And then you have like, I'm having to tell myself the only people on these message boards are people who everything went bad for. And so like, it's just this like constant mental battle that frankly, I don't know, like, and thank goodness, like my poor wife, this surgery happened within 8 months of us being married. And so like we get married and immediately I become like, I'm unable to walk. And so it was this challenging journey, but now like, I try and be better about it, but it did like kind of cut a change in how I viewed my life for a while and how I had to be more cautious. Right. To think about my back a lot more. When a client calls and talks about their back, I have a standing desk. I immediately will pop that up. And so like it sticks in my head a lot more. So it was not what I planned, but like you talk about it, I know a number of people who had like an illness appear in law school because on top of all those things, I was stressed. And then when I couldn't study, it was like, well, I was stressed because I couldn't study. And it just had like a dangerous cycle. And so I don't know if I have a good lesson to other people on it, but I mean, I'm glad that I stuck with it. Like it was, and right, adversity helps make you better. But I don't know if I would have told myself those things at the time, I would have been pissed. It doesn't help. Like it doesn't make it better. It was just hard.
What was your experience with getting and navigating accommodations, and then your sense of your classmates and peers perception
Hmm.
of you having those accommodations?
Navigating it wasn't terribly hard. I mean, it was, I think I'm glad I wasn't a 1L because I know there were professors who would have refused to have their classes recorded and would have made it impossible. Which is crazy, right? They wouldn't have allowed it because they would have felt it would have invaded some privacy or for the students. And so I'm like navigating was challenging, but like it felt embarrassing, right? Like it is very clear that this camera in the room is for me. It is very clear that this like I was working on group projects with people, and I'm at home laying in bed, and so that was embarrassing. I think at times, like I remember I came back because I had to get something like scanned, and like this person like it very much felt like they were like asking a lot of questions in a way that like you get extended time on a test, and so it felt like, and this person did better on the test than me either way. They were going to, but it to some people treated it as an unfair advantage when it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I would much rather not have more time. Like I have to get up in the middle of the test and walk around for 10 minutes. I don't wish that I had this. And so like it definitely felt again the shame of it that is a much harder thing. Like I can only imagine someone carrying around a permanent disability, but like you see people taking the test in a separate room, right? It's very clear what the process is. So navigating it was people were helpful. It wasn't the worst process. But again, you feel like because you're competing against everybody, you have an unfair advantage. Like, but at the same point, this happened to me. And so it's really hard, like, put all those thoughts together at the same point of just trying to get a law degree to support my family, right? Like, so on top of all that, you feel guilt, I guess. And that's not, I don't know how, again, I don't know how to cure that. But it was just kind of what it is. I'm glad I wasn't at some super competitive school, but it's still law school is inherently competitive.
Is there anything that you would advise or ask law students now if they have a classmate that they're seeing is going through something, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, some struggle, and maybe also are needing accommodations? What do you wish someone had said to you or done for you, or in some other way either showed up for you,
Yeah.
or something that you wish someone hadn't done or said? Just something that, as difficult as the situation was, and there's only so much that can be done about that when that's your reality. But is there a way that classmates could have made it a more manageable situation?
I mean, I think, right, I can be responsible for my own feelings. And so like that person doing that, maybe again, I felt that guilt. I think the benefit, like the two benefits of it now are first off, post COVID, if you have the sniffles probably, and not that that's not the case, but like you're going to have that permission for a class to be recorded. It's probably the technology is built in and automatically recorded, so it's not even an issue. I think the thing for me though, that like looking back on it, that I wish that I had the perspective of, or somebody had like, whether or not I'm going to get through this, right? The thing, it feels so you're in this condensed environment, you have your own separate building for the law school. And I felt like I was competing with everyone. But I like looking at it now, I live in a different state. Most people in that state don't do the work I do. The competition of it all, like I wish I would have worked a lot more of that off because it doesn't matter. I'm not like, I never planned to be a Supreme Court clerk. And so I always tell people like, unless that's your plan, then just run your own race, right? You're not going, as much as it feels like you're all going for the same exact jobs. You're really not. You probably want to live in different towns. You have different familial constraints. And so I feel like I wish I would have had the perspective of experience of like, dude, it doesn't matter. You're going to go back to New Mexico. And I know one other person from my class who did, and then they left and they didn't even do the same thing. So it all feels like you're running a race against everyone when really you're all on different tracks. And I wish I had that perspective would have been the most helpful.
Mm, I can relate to that. Absolutely.
There's not
And
a ton of Wellness Esquire podcasts, right? There's not, everyone is not like your lane is your own lane.
absolutely. And, I got to this point because I think, well, when I my very first post on LinkedIn
Mhm.
about being, I was sort of posted and said, "Hey, I'm a lawyer, and by the way, I have these chronic and quote unquote rare diseases." And at the time, I genuinely, genuinely thought I was the only person with that kind of a story.
Yeah.
And part of what's funny about that now, when I look at it, is uh, the reason I posted was because I thought to myself, when I was in school, I never doubted that I'd be able to do whatever I wanted to do,
Hmm.
but I was just like, this is really fucking hard in a way that it's not for other people. And I have no one to talk to other than, sort of, very thankfully, I'm a twin, and
Okay.
she was in medical school at the time, and we had the same health stuff for the most part. And so I had someone else who could relate to me in that way, but I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have someone to look to and say, okay, so this is how our path is going to be different
Right.
than what it seems to be for everyone else, but it can be done. And these are some of the considerations. And I just thought, even though I thought, oh, it's just me,
Hmm.
I also thought, well, what if there is someone out there who just would benefit from knowing they're not alone? Um, and I say all this having also been aware that I had a classmate who had emergency brain surgery
Hmm.
during law school as well. But there's so little discussion around all of this. So when I posted about it, I really just thought, I'm the only one with this story. And then, as I said, when I started to open up about it, I was just overwhelmed with how many people had some version. And in a lot of cases, it led them to decide not to practice law
Hmm.
because they didn't know how to make it work. And that's also one of my goals with the Wellness Esquire. It's around that. It's, well, how can we really design our careers so that they fit into our lives, whatever our lives look like. And so for some people that may be, I've got a chronic illness, or I've got chronic pain, or I've got just life circumstances, and so I don't want to practice in 80 plus hours a week, but I'm really good at what I do, so how do I fit it all together? um, and so, to me, having people like you share stories like this and just say, yeah, this was hard,
Yes.
and this is then how I navigated it while I was in the situation. My next question is, so how did you sort of find your way out of that? And as, because your pain lasted, it's not like you just had the surgery and then things were magical. That went on.
Yeah.
So what did that progression kind of look like for you? And then entering into your career, were you still dealing with pain, or what did that look like?
Uh, yes. So I mean, it got like yeah. At first, right, you get a back surgery. They tell you that it's going to take time, and then like a year later, I was feeling a lot better. I did a bike. I helped. I escorted somebody in a bike race or in a running race, and they were in a wheelchair. And I kept turning around, and I went back to the doctor, and I re-herniated my back. And so I was like devastated, but I was like, okay, I know what to do. I knew, and so I went to PT, and like things have progressed, right? Working on my core, all the things. But the like looking back, and it's like I think I just kept going. Like I didn't like I just continued. I didn't. It was putting one foot in front of the other. Like, and not that I'm like I had some advantages, like a spouse there to support me, right? That made that, it would have been much more isolating to not have somebody in that role who was pushing me in. Like, right, it feels more pressure because law school feels like the last step. You're not going to school after that for the most part. It is the precipice of adulthood, even if you're older going to school. And so I think I just kept going. Like I had pain for a while, but I had, like, within the last 2 years, a return to not running, but like tonight I'll go play basketball in my neighborhood, something I hadn't done for a long time. And so it just kept, I kept going. I don't know if I felt I gave myself the permission to quit. I had maybe in my head I had committed my wife to move across the country to a state she'd never been to, and we've been there for 2 years. I'm like, I gotta finish this. So I never thought I couldn't. So maybe that was like, again, a benefit that I just never envisioned dropping out. But I was, there was a worry, was like, can I finish? Um, and so the that's the stuff, like, it, looking back at it now, it seems easy, right? It's a straight line from there to here. But then it definitely was not. And like, again, I'm like, I remember those Google searches of like people saying like, I had this back surgery, same as me. I've never walked again. It's like, oh my God. And so you have this like, you have to think of the perspectives of those other people. But again, you don't know. You can only continue to take care of yourself. And at the same point, I have a very dear friend who had an illness pop up during law school and didn't continue and found a path that they prefer better for them, right? It's like it's hard to say the law school the answer. Like I look at it, like you say too, you can do a lot of different things with a law degree. you kind of have to become a lawyer to know what those are. It's like, sure, people talk about JD preferred jobs, and I never consider those. But if you want to do some specialized or interesting or unique thing, you kind of got to go practice for a little bit in some way, shape, or form, or just take a leap. And so that's, oh yeah, looking back on it, what I'm now almost 8 years post that surgery. And so I'm, I could need another one. I don't know, but I think at this point it's like I can only proceed forward and just make the best out of what I have now. Is like, I don't know if it's made me super appreciative. Like I think it's easy to forget what it was like 8 years ago, but again, at the time it was not easy by any means.
Do you feel like any of that experience of dealing with that back pain and the recovery process has kind of informed your perspective now on well-being and how you approach your life and how you fit your career into your life?
I'm working on that. I'll say like so. I'll first off start like it definitely informs like how I think of clients again in the like the moments of like I try and always recommend getting a therapist, whether you get hit by a car and had a small leg injury, do serious injuries. I always recommend it because I think car accidents, it's just a car accident. A lot of people can treat it that way when in reality it's a traumatic event. It is a highly traumatic event that changes people's lives. And so I always encourage that. And I think, like I said, when people start talking about their back, I get definitely pretty sympathetic. And so I try and like, you know, I can't understand anyone's journey, but I definitely can try and get close in that context. I think the best thing that I've had for like my own, like my wellness is two big things of like having a kid and starting a business, right? If I want both of those things to go forward and me to be, well, if I want to be continue being a dad and if I want my business to continue, I need to be healthy. And so it's trying to make more choices. I'm working on it, right? Like thinking of like I am the vessel of the business moving forward for now. And so I have to be more conscious of it. And I continue like try and I'm working in the middle of like 100 days of trying to journal in a row of like little things. What can I do to be reflecting? What can I do to be taking better care of my body and my mind? I say that and it sounds like it's super easy and successful. I feel a lot. I missed a day or two here. Like it's not, so I'm working on it. But I definitely, I'm about to turn 35 here. And I definitely hope that on the other end of 35 and looking 10 years down the road, the goal is that I'm making those choices that take care of me and that take care of that I can be around for my kid, my wife, and then continue to help people because I do not always great at the start. People call me and I try not to say how are you doing because it's usually bad, but I really love the end. I really love that part of like getting to first off, people are impressed with what I'm able to do for them, but also just like, hey, thank you for being there for me and like having those moments. And I'm not an inherently religious person, but I'll tell you, it feels pretty flattering when people mention they thank us for being able to be connected, and that's the thing that feels cool to me, right? Or people like meant having that connection that's not mine, but that it means enough to a person like that is like a it's a pretty big high that I get from the job that I never would have expected.
That's amazing. Can you talk more about some of the wellness oriented practices that you bring in? Maybe it's not a daily basis, or at least that you try to bring in, and also how you kind of treat yourself when you realize, oh, I missed a day here and I missed a day there, and then how you get back to it.
I mean, like I said, I try and get at least 30 minutes of exercise 5 to 6 days a week. I try and increase that, right? I try and be very conscious of like, okay, like today I didn't exercise in the morning because I know we'll do basketball today, but I try and get those days in because I feel like I am much more anxious, much harder to deal with and be around. I am much less patient. All of the things that I need for not even just being a good business owner, but being a good dad and husband are things that are important to me. I feel better if I shock my system and start with a cold shower. Like that's something I have to do just because now it feels because it does like shock some anxiety out of me. Again, I'm trying to build in some more of those. Like I said, journaling has been really helpful to me on the like reflection side of being nobody's going to read this, so I got to be honest with me here. And so, but the things I'm working towards are like I need to increase the time I'm exercising. I need to be better managing those for long term, and then like making just as I get older, right? I start to feel more creaks and more my elbows hurt or something. So just doing things like that, but having some form of bike. I bought a new bike recently. Just things to keep me going outdoors and doing those kind of things are the important part. I don't know what was the second part of your question?
Oh, you've mentioned a couple of times, really, the kind of your that you don't always
Oh,
uh,
when I fail. But
You're not always perfect
yeah,
with what you're trying to do. So how do you navigate that?
I mean,
How do you treat yourself when you realize I didn't do what I wanted to do?
try and remind myself that I can I have one of two options. I can beat myself up about it, or I can continue going. Like I was like I missed a day journaling one time for whatever reason, and I was like, well, I was trying to do 100 days in a row. And it's like, well, new clock starts now. I keep thinking of the adage of what's the best time to plant a tree? It's 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And so sometimes, if I spend a lot of effort, now I should learn from it. I don't think I should just like give myself the break, but I should, if I'm going to move forward, right, as an entrepreneur to some degree, the lack of movement is worse. Depends, but for the most part, is worse than movement in a lot of contexts. And so if I'm continuing to move forward, okay, well, today is a new day, and I can only be better today. I can't, if I spend a lot of time lamenting, I'm going to make it worse, and I don't need to be caught in some kind of shame spiral.
Is there something about yourself that you have felt like, oh, I'm the only person? It's the only, there can't possibly be another lawyer out there who's experiencing this kind of mistake, this form of anxiety, this way of reacting, and or something that just makes you feel other.
I mean, you feel, I think some of those experiences do. I think that I mean, I think sometimes, I don't know if it's othering or in the sense of you want to stick out, right? As a solo, you want to stick out. And maybe sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, am I good enough? Do I stick out enough to draw in clients? And right. And I don't want, importance isn't that's like ego. But I mean, right, people have to know I exist to hire me. And so do I, I have the same, I think maybe it's more that I stick in the general, my doubts. Do I need to be more unusual? Do I where do I find that opportunity for me to be different, to stick out and help more people? But then also so that I'm not just I don't want to start the same law firms I've worked at before, and some are good and some are bad. But if I'm going to have that difference, it's so maybe it's the exact opposite. It's that sometimes I feel like, am I just generic? Am I like most other people? And so what can I do? And is you can't make a decision because it's like or dislike other or unlike other people. But am I too much like the crowd in a way that isn't going to advantage my business, isn't going to help draw in more clients? And so, yeah, my answer is maybe it's the exact opposite sometimes. But again, I also think that I don't need to be. I never was an idea person. I never was the one with the big ideas. And I don't frankly think starting a law firm is a big idea. A lot of people have done it. There are a ton of resources. I could not be luckier to work at a time than I can listen to a podcast every single day about someone starting a law firm, about tips.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't exist 10 years ago. And so I couldn't be luckier to have that. And so sometimes it's well, as much as that, in my head, I'm well, I'm worried about all those things. Does it matter? Do people just want a personal relationship? Again, they want an attorney. They don't want a billboard. And so if they don't want a billboard attorney, hey, I know Damon. He's great. And so maybe just doing, again, if I do a good job for them and stay in contact and I'm honest with them, I don't necessarily need to be special or important, right? That's not what they're looking for, right? I found people prefer convenience. People prefer communication, and they prefer knowing what's going on. Well, if I can offer those, and sure, if they need other things, I'll go to a client to meet with them. Maybe that's not the worst thing. And so, right, again, it's is my sense of self-importance and needing to be different, does it matter? And so I don't know. Also, what are you going to build me for this session, by the way? Because it feels kind of kind of what we're going through. But yeah, I don't know. So it's like finding that, am I different? Do I need to be? Does it matter? And maybe again, at the end of the day, all that really matters is if I'm helping people and doing what I enjoy, and that I don't need to be anything more than what matters in my house and for the people that live here. That's the thing that means the most to me. So maybe I should just focus on that.
Well, it seems like you are focusing on that, and maybe you still have the thoughts that come up every day where
Yeah.
you still question things, because of course you're going to question things, but it sounds like you really have taken, you mentioned you've had experiences at firms that were both good and bad, and you've understood what part of it really feels authentic to you, and also what the people you're looking to serve are actually looking for. While maybe a fancier firm is going to have a whole process around, well, no, this is when you tell the client, and it has
Hmm.
to be on this kind of a schedule, and you're like, well, I mean, I know you've posted about this, but actually, do you want to share how you view kind of client treatment and that client experience with letting go of the formality and just recognizing, hey, I'm serving humans. I too am a human.
Yeah.
This is how I want to show up.
I mean, like, honestly, like the thing, like, and I found this to be generational in the sense, like, I text my grandma sometimes. I just kind of assume clients will text unless they tell me they don't. And like, I just having like, I'll have that kind of relationship. But again, like, it becomes as time progresses and you spend years with these people, like, that relationship is really kind of the direction that I'm going for. And having that of like somebody who's like, hey, then like this is frustrating me, or like can be very honest and communicate to me and they feel comfortable. But like not having like, sure, there are certain tasks we have when we start a case that I want to have, and I'm trying to implement more systems. But as a solo and running a smaller firm, I had a case recently come in where the client had filed a case on their own, and I was able to jump in. A lot of bigger firms wouldn't take that. A lot of smaller firms that have been around a little longer don't do that. I have the ability to sometimes in my head go, "That's interesting." Like, I don't know if that's going to be a moneymaker or not, but that's interesting. Like being a lawyer is an intellectual exercise. Like our brains are built for like you go to school to learn how to solve problems. Sometimes a problem sounds fun, and so I kind of can build this practice that allows me to do that. That is totally a one-off or totally something different or totally allows me to grow. And so that's as my firm is defined with injury. Well, I've started doing some civil rights cases because I think that's an injury. That's an injury to you. And so I try and stick within that realm of injury, but like I have that flexibility as my own, and then to help clients in a different way or to say, hey, this is how it would traditionally be done, but we can try something different here, right? I can be there are different risks I can take. And again, like at the end of the day, I have to ask myself if this is something that's going to be viable for a business, of course, but then also for a client. It's like, hey, this is a risk. Let's agree to it if you want to do that. If not, what can I do to best protect you? And I can make all those decisions today, right? Like I don't have to consult with a bunch of people. I don't have to get permission. It's my show, and so that feels good in that regard. But it also allows me to I'll take feedback. I've had clients say, I prefer not this. Okay, great. We'll only call. We won't text. You can make those changes pretty easily, and it's not hard to communicate. A little ship can move a lot faster than a big ship. It can turn around and change directions.
How do you, because you mentioned texting with clients,
Sure.
I'd love to know how you manage boundaries with that. And, is there, do you set side time aside for yourself to just be like, I'm just me right now. I'm not lawyering. I'm not available. Or if you make yourself available all the time, how do you take care of yourself with that in mind?
I try not to be available all the time. I generally communicate to people that during the workday for the most part, right? If people are like, "Oh, I can't do that," we'll schedule a call. Like that's the best way I can be available. I try not to have a lot of those. I mean, and frankly, at a certain point, I'm small enough that I'm not going to have so many cases like that. But I try not to communicate too much past 5. Sometimes it happens, and so I usually cut it off. I don't send a lot of messages on the weekend. I'll check my emails, right? I still have to be the buck stops here, so I still have to be responsible for some of those things. But I try and write like I try to be good about just putting my phone down at least for the time between end of work and kid goes to bed. I'm trying to be better about leaving it alone. So again, those are efforts. Are my boundaries always the best? No. I mean, like in answer to your question, it's like, can I pick it up less? Can I not pick it up first thing in the morning? And then on days like, but it allows me to take days where I was able to go to the fair with my kid or to do little things like that. So are my boundaries the best? No, but I think I have like some opportunities. And at the same point though, if a new client called me at 7 p.m. on a Friday, I would probably apologize to my wife and go take that call because that allows us to help people and do what we like to do helping wise, and then it also allows me to take care of the family. So like it unfortunately sometimes that's harder, right? There are differences, but like work life balance, it doesn't need to be the old boomers of like oh, my kid was born on Friday and I went back to work on Monday. I don't want that lifestyle, and so
Hmm.
and I can say no to a case then if that's the case, or I can tell people, hey, I'll get back to you in a little while. Like I don't want to do that, but I like what I do, but I have a lot of options in that regard.
Well, I think it's also, for me, because I'm a sensitive person and I care so deeply about my clients. So what they're working on genuinely matters to me. They're just not just one more client. And that's clearly the same for you as well. And so I think figuring out how to develop boundaries that serve your client and also allow you to take care of yourself and set time aside for yourself, and also to just have enough empty moments so you can even do a good job, because if we're just working nonstop, we're not going to do as good of a job.
Yep.
And often in certain ways, I think the more you care, the harder it is in a certain way to put things down, because you feel so invested and it feels so personal.
It's hard to turn off if I wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes it's hard not to start running through the Rolodex of like things I need to get done, or like I want to be on the ball. I want to be ahead of the game for my clients. So sometimes, and so it's like even just like a breathing exercise of like, okay, I can't sleep right now. I can't take care of this. So I don't, some days when I feel like I don't want to exercise, I'm like, if I don't do this today, it's gonna be a much harder day. And so those little steps, yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think it is plausible to do my job if you don't care about people, but I think it makes it a hell of a whole lot easier to do it caring about people, because I want them to feel good about how I treated them. I want them to feel like they got in a better position. Like when some of them feel defeated when they come to me, I want them to get back that like pride in themselves, and that help them. Cause like I think doing what clients do with me is they have to be brave. They have to be willing to file a lawsuit. They have to be willing to maybe sue somebody they know in some contexts. And so there's a bravery required to it that, again, yeah, you're right. I have to take care of myself to help them get there a lot of the times.
Anything else you want to share about your well-being journey, the way you show up with your practice, or anything else?
I mean, I guess in the context of like, again, the well-being is like, I feel like I'm just getting started to some degree, right? I feel, I saw somebody else say like the median lawyer is 46 and I'm not there yet. And so I got plenty of time, and it feels like I try and remind myself, as much as I like getting things done soon and I like getting things done now, that the practice and the work is a marathon, not a sprint. And so my hope would be I have a law firm in 20 years. That would be, I think, awesome if I can build something. Like I know people don't say this, and I've been joking with my wife, but I'd love for my daughter to become a lawyer for only one reason, and that's so we could work together, right? Like it's if I can build a place that is like family business, it's kind of a cool idea. It's something I never imagined doing, but to some degree, I'm working of like, okay, what are the steps to get there? And it's like if I can do something a little bit to get there every day, or make a connection that builds a business, or anything like that, that's a positive. And so sometimes on the days where it's slow, or I don't have a lot of work, or where it's easy to be like, well, if I'm not doing something, it's bad. It's again trying to remind myself, well, that doesn't mean everything, and that doesn't define me. And like today is just today, and okay, there's something I can do if I'm feeling like that to move things forward and get a little bit better.
Amazing. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for spending your time and energy with
appreciate
me,
it.
and for being so open about everything, and just the way that you're showing up on social media and in your practice. And the way I see it, we're building a legal community that values the connection between well-being and performance really takes the community.
Yeah,
And so everyone who shows up in the way that you are is part of shifting the way our industry operates, which only benefits us.
yeah.
So thank you for being part of that.
Well, thank you for pushing that forward, and thanks for right again. It feels like I was flattered to be invited, but it also feels like you're like, does my opinion matter enough? And hopefully, like in my thought of ever doing this thing, is that like somebody, it helps one person, and then that's to some degree, it's more than I could have done otherwise. So happy to spend the time, and thanks for having me.
I can confirm that your opinion matters.
Thank you.
And I have a friend who we've already recorded an episode, and he has his own law firm as well, and is also, his name is Cody,
Okay.
Cody Hand, and he also has another business where he invites people on to just share their stories,
Awesome.
because he, I think more than a lot of us, really understand that every single story matters. And while we often may think, but someone else has my story, and what's really so unique about it, his perspective, which I agree with, is, but no one's told your story the way you will, and someone needs to hear it. So while you may wonder, does my story matter? He and I will tell you together, because I know he would say the same.
Well, thank you.
It does, and so thank you for sharing it.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for your time, and best of luck on your travels.
Thanks for listening. I hope you got a ton of value from this conversation, and that you will check out the links in the description to learn more about the guest and the Wellness Esquire. And I hope you take even just 1 minute to do something for yourself today. Maybe right now. Drink more water, say no, call a friend, do something that makes you happy, have a 30-second dance party, find something to make you laugh. Also, be sure to subscribe and send the podcast to a colleague. And if we're not yet connected on LinkedIn, please fix that. I'd love to know you. See you next time.